Hey guys, and welcome to the Performance Hub podcast, and thanks for tuning in. So before we get started, we want to let you guys know about an amazing offer we have going at the moment. Using the coupon code COMMUNITY, we have 1 month free access to the Performance Hub. So this is our online member site where we have tons of content, from in-depth exercise tutorials, videos on different strength and conditioning methods, program templates, articles on nutrition, stress management, and just a ton more content. So head over to www.pikeperformance.uk to sign up and get started on that today. As well as that, below this video, we've linked all our social media channels, as well as all of our guest socials. So go and like and comment and share, as it really helps us to be able to produce more content for you guys, like the interview that we have today. Okay, so that's enough of that. Let's dive into today's interview and see what it's all about. Okay, well, thanks for coming down and talking to us, Ben. Really appreciate it. I've already done like a bit of an intro, so I don't know if you want to kind of introduce yourself, let people know kind of where you're working and how you got into the industry, and just a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I've been a coach for nearly 4 years now. Started off in the industry like everybody else, really. I enjoyed exercise to a degree. So I wasn't one of these typical gym goers that was obsessed with the gym and just thought, I'm going to become a coach because I love going to the gym. I think the reason that I became a coach was whenever I was on Google or back when I was going on like bodybuilding.com and all those sorts of websites, and you would have like a little workout. You'd find a workout template that had been copied and pasted on there or whatever, and you'd go into the gym. And every time I saw an exercise on a program, I did the exercise, I always thought, why are we doing this? Why am I doing that exercise? Why have they given it to me? And how, what's the best way for me to execute it, and all of this other kind of stuff. And it just led me to just doing my own little bits and bobs of research, whatever. And then I would go to the gym with friends, and I might say, oh, I read this needs to be done this way, or let's try this exercise and see if that works. And it always got a good response. And then that led me down this is actually quite good fun, learning about this stuff and then teaching it to somebody else. And then I might be in the gym and I might see another PT saying something or teaching something to their client. And in my head, I'd go, I don't know if that's right because I read this, but this guy's a personal trainer, so he must know what he's talking about. And I wasn't particularly enjoying the job that I was doing. I was doing it because I was living in London in my early 20s and I wanted to make some money and go out all the time with my mates. But I got a degree in sport and exercise science, so I always kind of enjoyed that side of things. And then eventually I just thought, actually, I was spending more time researching training and nutrition whilst I was at work than I was actually doing my job.
I've been there.
Yeah, and I wasn't enjoying the job. And in the end, I just thought, I'm going to become a PT. So I went ahead and did it. So I've been doing it for about 4 years. And I work at a gym in Haywards Heath, which is in West Sussex, called the Performance Project.
Okay. And
we do one-to-one personal training, but we also do semi-private personal training as well, which is like the small group stuff that a lot of gyms are doing now. So that's kind of me, really.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. So you've not been in the industry for a huge amount of time, but
no, relatively short.
Yeah, but I mean, I first heard you on the Chris Knott podcast. Actually, I think you're on there a couple of times talking about shoulders and shoulder health and your kind of history with that, and then covering similar stuff to what we're going to be talking about today. And I think your depth of knowledge came across really well, and in all your content on social media, you can see that you're taking maybe a slightly more considered approach to training the body and the kind of physical aspects of training, the biomechanics of movement than perhaps some in the industry. So I think that really comes across well. And that's some of the stuff that I kind of want to dig into today, really, is is taking a more considered approach to how we're training our bodies, how we're, if we're going to devise a leg day, for example, what are some of the considerations that we want to be thinking about, and maybe troubleshooting some of the, some exercises that have stood the test of time, but maybe could be executed in a slightly better way in terms of getting the most out of an exercise. And I know this is something that you've done a few posts on social media, and I really liked what I was reading, so I was really keen to kind of have you on and talk through some of this stuff.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds good.
So, okay, well, let's start with exercise selection. So, to use that example that I gave, if you've got a guy who's looking to come into the gym and you're going to be working with him, obviously, let's put aside, you've done an assessment, you know what his goal are. Maybe his goal is to, build muscle and, just generally improve his physique a little bit. If you're going to be thinking about devising like a kind of leg session for this chat, what are some of the factors that you're going to be thinking about in terms of biomechanics and how you're pairing exercises together, and maybe equipment selection and things like this?
Okay, so I think the first thing that we need to look at ultimately is what is the goal of the client. And every time we choose an exercise, we need to be thinking, what am I actually trying to achieve by doing this exercise? Because traditionally, and when I first got my PT qualification, it was always taught, if you want big legs, do squats. Sure. If you want a big chest, do a bench press. But the way that my kind of belief is that when a client comes in, rather than me saying, cool, you want to build your legs, let's do squats, we should be thinking, what am I going to achieve by giving squats to this client? Are squats the best exercise to get this client from where he is now to where he wants to be? And in some cases, yeah, that might be right, but in lots of cases, probably not. And the way that I will come to this conclusion is looking at how they're built and how they're structured and how they move, how they execute things, how skilled they are in certain areas. Because something like a squat, for instance, even though it's always been called a basic exercise, you might see people say, if you're just starting out in the gym, do the basics, do squats, do deadlifts.
Squats, deads, and presses,
Yeah, they're not basic exercises at all. They're actually they're so advanced. The amount of joints that are involved, the amount of muscles that are involved, the amount of coordination, the amount of skill that's involved, they're not basic exercises. So you need to make sure that the client is ready and tolerant enough to take on these things. So if I was looking at a client, I'd be looking at, okay, what are they capable of? So if in my head I'm thinking squats, I'm thinking, okay, how much ankle dorsiflexion do they have? How much knee flexion is available? How much hip flexion is available? How much hip external rotation is available? What's happening with their spine? How much spinal flexion do they have available? Can they get their hands into a position where they can actually grip the bar? How do they how much shoulder external rotation do they have? How much wrist flexion extension do they have available to actually grab the bar? If none of those things fall into place, then in my opinion, a squat isn't going to be a good exercise for them.
Sure.
Especially when they come in and their goal is, I just want to lose a little bit of weight. Okay, cool. There's probably a better exercise for you, then it's going to fit your joint structure better, suit where you are skill wise, and be better for you in terms of your overall health. Whereas on the other hand, if it was a client that's, say, a powerlifter, and a powerlifter comes in and he's like, right, mate, I want to compete, I need to up my squat by 50 to 100 kilos.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, fine, we need to squat. Okay.
There's a level of specificity then, I suppose, isn't there?
Yeah, precisely. And this person, they may come to you and they might not be very well built for squatting, but you need to then work that stuff in that's going to make them good at squatting, make them good at the skill. So if they don't have very good hip flexion, for example, say they really struggle to hit depth on squat because they've got limited hip flexion. Now, it could be down to just the way that they're built. It could be that where the head of the femur goes into the joint of the pelvis, that they're just not going to get that far down. It's just the way that they're built. And you could say, okay, well, you're not built for squatting, but if you really want to go ahead, then that's up to you. I'm just a PT. But it could be muscle weaknesses in areas. Again, it could be skill, and you can work on those things in the background whilst building the squat. So I would look at things that way. But generally, for me, and probably yourself and a lot of the guys listening to this that are just general population clients, I'd be looking at how they move, how well skilled they are, and what is the goal, and what are the best exercises for them as they currently stand. It may be that when they come into you, you think, okay, cool, you're not built for squatting. That's not a good exercise for you at all. You'd be better off on a leg press. Or if the leg press isn't right for you, cool, why don't we just start you off on a leg extension, or a 45-degree hip extension, or a lying leg curl, or something like that. And then as they become more skilled, and the more that you work with them, it may be that cool. You remember when 3 months ago the leg press wasn't quite right? Well, we've done a bunch of work since then, so let's go back on it and try again. And you may jump on the leg press, and they know how to execute movements better. They've got more skill. We've worked on some stuff, and they can move a lot better. So cool. Now the leg press is a great exercise, but we've built them up to a point where they all now can tolerate that movement a lot better than they could have tolerated that movement in the past when they first came to see us.
Sure, yeah. And look, just taking it back to the assessment, because I think it is kind of relevant. If you've got a chap coming in who's, like the example we gave, looking to build a bit of muscle, are you going to be looking at kind of active and passive ranges of motion to make that decision about whether they're kind of able to squat, or do you go for more of a kind of movement-based, like FMS style overhead squat sort of assessment?
I do it purely on a joint by joint basis, and what the client has available. So I'd be looking at active ranges, or their current active ranges, because active ranges can change when you work on them. When you can work them. Personally, for me, I'm not a fan of the FMS system.
Sure.
Not to say that it's not a great system. I think it's a great system in terms of it teaches clients, it teaches coaches to actually think about assessing clients.
Certainly, yeah.
Because a lot of people don't. But in my opinion, something like FMS, it's built, the results just show you whether or not a client is good at FMS.
Yeah. It becomes a bit of a kind of sport in itself, doesn't it? How to beat your score.
I mean, I remember when I first became a PT, and I thought, I should probably be assessing clients, and I typed in client assessments on Google, and FMS came up, and I thought, sick, this is perfect. It comes with a DVD, it comes with a little booklet. And when a client gets in, I can get my ruler out and the hurdle, and this will look like
it looks good. It's good.
Perfect. But then I remember, I vividly remember this was in the session with at the gym that I was training in at the time, and we all kind of got together and we went through FMS, and we were doing the hurdle thing. We have to lift your leg up and get over the hurdle without touching it.
Sure.
And I remember someone went to do the hurdle test, and they couldn't get over it, and then someone else did it really well. And I was looking at the two trainers, and I thought, well, hang about. We've got a 6'3" guy here with ridiculously long legs, and then we've got like a 5'1" girl here with really short legs, but now they're doing the same test. So they're going to get different scores. But she's got much better hip flexion relative to him. She's got 120 degrees of hip flexion, where he's only got 90.
Yeah.
So how how does that work? How can
it's not?
that's when I kind of started thinking, well, actually, this probably isn't built for everybody. But like I said before, I would definitely say it's a great, let's say, starter kit for someone that's never done an assessment on somebody before. If there's a PT that's serious about being a good coach, and they're thinking, you know, I want to educate myself and I want to do the best for my clients, where do I start? I want to start doing assessments. I think it's a great starter kit, a great tool. It lays out some fundamentals of what you should be looking at, and then you can just briefly start there, and it kind of points you in the right. Okay, this is what I need to look at. And then I feel like you need to be able to advance on from there and look at things a little bit differently. So what I do now when someone comes in is, if they say, cool, I want to squat, let's go back to that. I'll say, cool, show me 10 squats. And they'll do 10 squats, and you'll kind of circle around and go, okay, there's something's happening here, something's happening there, that's not quite right. And then you would just break that down. You go, okay, so you had this like hip shift thing going on. If we were to load a barbell on your back, that could get quite nasty. So let's see if we can tweak that a little bit. And then you might fiddle around with their hips, or could be their ankles, or their spine. And you fiddle around a bit, and you say, okay, well, we did this thing and that kind of worked, so let's work on that for a little bit, and then we might come back to squatting at another time, but we need to fix this first. So that's how I would generally assess people. I'd have specific exercises in my head, but then if that exercise doesn't quite look right, I'd regress it, and then I would find the one that works.
Sure.
So for me, generally, when I take on a new client, it probably after about the 5th or 6th session, that's when I start putting the program together.
Sure, right. Okay.
So we experiment with a lot of stuff, and it's not. I mean, for a lot of the clients that come in, I'm quite open and honest with them. I'll say, cool, we're going to try a whole bunch of exercises before, because I don't know who you are. I don't know how you're built yet. I don't know what the exercise best for you is. You come to me, you've got this goal, you want to achieve this. We need to spend a little time fiddling around with some things before we can put the perfect program in place to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. And then after about the 5th or 6th session, I've got a whole list of exercises that I know are perfectly suited to the way they're built, perfectly suited to where they're currently at skill-wise. I know that they can execute them properly. I know that by that time, I know what cues will work for them as well. So I know, okay, cool, verbal cues work for you, or visual cues, you need me to demonstrate it a bunch of time, or you need me to kind of put my hands on you and guide you into place, and that works. Sure. So I know what cues work for them. Then after about that 6th session, things can really take off. You've got your exercises, you've got cues, the client knows how to execute stuff, and then the workouts just go bang.
Yeah. Start loading and start
loading stuff up heavy, start making some progress, the intensity goes up, they're like,
I like that. I mean, I think that's great, because it kind of sets the overall kind of theme, if you like, of we're not going to rush into getting you these kind of, Instagram ready results in 4 weeks or whatever. It's like, look, we need time to find out what's going to work for you, so we can actually create the right program, so you can commit to a long enough block of training that's actually going to bring around some good results without kind of sacrificing, long-term joint integrity and just general health and movement quality, because we're trying to jam you into this kind of hole,
Yeah, precisely. And for me, it's yes, you've got this goal of you want to lose weight or build muscle, etc., etc. But then just for me as well, my goal is to make sure that you remain healthy. Because you could come see me and I could get you shredded in 12 weeks. But then would it sit right with me if that client left shredded after 12 weeks, but their knees are battered and their shoulders are killing them, and they're completely worn out and they've got all these aches and pains because I've been giving them movements that don't suit them.
Yeah.
And for some people, whatever, it's training, shit happens, but look how like lean you are. But for me, like that doesn't sit well with me. So I wouldn't want to put that upon a client.
So where's your kind of, where's your line? Like how far do you go across that line where you allow some discomfort? You allow, people, obviously we know we're going to have a bit of DOMs when people kind of first start training and things like that, but that should sort of clear up fairly quickly. But obviously people, I'm sure you see people with chronic hip problems, chronic shoulder problems, elbows, whatever it might be, back problems. How much discomfort would you allow within like your exercise selection, or would you be looking to, really stamp out any sort of discomfort, even from kind of chronic problems?
It really depends on what the issue is. For a client, I think let's just take, for instance, somebody that's just had some like shoulder surgery.
Sure.
And they're coming back from a surgery and they need that joint to get moving. So you figure out kind of where, how, let's just say we want to get them to a point where they can do your bench press. So we need abduction, we need horizontal adduction. We need the shoulder blade to retract and protract properly. And something like a surgery will limit that.
Yeah, sure.
But if I can get them to kind of actively start moving the shoulder blade around, just to get it going and to tell the nervous system that it's cool for us to go there, but they are experiencing a little bit of discomfort, I'm not, as long as they're not rolling around on the floor in pain because of it. If it's just kind of that's a bit achy now, then I don't mind that so much, because they suffered some kind of trauma, and as long as it's not me taking their arm and kind of like pushing it into some position that it's not ready to go, if they're doing it by themselves under control, then that's okay. If it's someone that's got like no issues whatsoever, and I'm loading up a leg press for them and I'm like, right, we're going to do an outrageously heavy set of 8 here to failure, and they're coming out of it every set going, cool, my knees are killing me. That's when I think, cool, let's regress things a little bit, because you're probably more feeling the pain in your knee joints than you are the muscles in your legs. And that's not the goal of the exercise. That's not why we picked this exercise. So that's kind of where I draw the line, really. And it's hard. It really depends on who you've got in front of you.
Of course, of course. Okay. So in terms of like, picking exercises for people, we're looking at our assessment and what we know about those people, and we're looking at their history and their goal, and kind of devising a program. But some of the kind of exercises that you've been sharing on some of your social media are kind of different ways of executing perhaps common exercises. So, using cables and bands, but also just changing how someone may set up, or changing the bit of equipment that someone may use for, I think I remember you did a lying external rotation. You've done a few other bits. And this is kind of looking at some of those principles of the resistance profiles and strength profiles. So this is, I would say, I mean, I haven't been in the industry for a long period of time, but this seems to be something that's building up a bit of traction, and more people are kind of starting to talk about it. But there doesn't seem to be a great deal written about it on the internet or in text. So do you want to just explain a little bit about what resistance profiles and strength profiles are, and how they kind of, impact on exercise selection and design?
Yeah, sure. So the easiest way to describe it is, so if we start with a strength profile, or most people will have heard strength curve.
Sure.
However, not all movements go in a curve. So it first stemmed from a guy called Tom Purvis over in the States, who runs a company called Resistance Training Specialists, or RTS. And a strength profile is essentially where a muscle goes from strongest to weakest.
Sure.
And if you have a muscle that, let's take the delt, for example, the mid deltoid, we'll say, will always be strongest when it's in its lengthened position, and then as I raise my arm up, it's going to get weaker as I get to the top there when it gets into its shortest position.
Okay.
So the strength profile for the delt is strong to weak.
So it's actually more of a straight line rather than a kind of curve.
So that's a straight line. So that's why he changed the terms to profile as opposed to curve, because it's getting weaker. So that's a straight line there.
Yeah.
Now a resistance profile is whenever you perform an exercise, what's happening to the resistance throughout that movement. So again, if I take the example of lateral raise, in a lateral raise, when I've got the dumbbell just in my arm, just by my side, there's no resistance to the delt at all there. Whereas as I lift my arm up, that dumbbell is now at its heaviest when I reach the end position. So the resistance profile for a dumbbell lateral raise would be light to heavy.
Sure.
Or no effort to maximal effort. And that's kind of how that when we're thinking about exercises, it's something that we should be considering, because there may be better alternatives. And ultimately what we're trying to achieve when we select exercises is you want the two to match up together. So if I take something like a lateral raise, I know that my deltoid is strongest when it's down here, down by my side. And as I lift it up, it's going to get weaker.
Sure.
So what I want is an exercise where the weight's going to be at its heaviest when I'm at my strongest. And I want the weight to get lighter as I get weaker. So then what I've created is a challenge that trains that muscle through its entire range of motion. So I've given it a full range challenge there. Because if I was to just do dumbbell lateral raises all the time, I'm never really challenging that lengthened position of the delt. I'm only ever challenging the short position. So if I want to train that muscle fully, I'm going to want to change it when it's in its strongest position, its lengthened position.
And I guess you might use a cable in that instance, a cable coming from a horizontal tether to make sure we're loading through that initial phase of the movement. Yeah,
exactly.
So you're essentially making the exercise more effective, really. We're looking at where the muscle can produce the most force and the least force, and trying to match, the resistance to those, rather than missing a chunk of what we could potentially do and then loading one half, almost like doing half a rep, I suppose, really doing like a half rep, just loading that top part of the movement.
Yeah, exactly. It's training the muscle fully. Another example would be, you mentioned bands. If we take an exercise like a leg press, for example. So with an exercise like a leg press, where I've got my feet up on the platform, I unrack the weight. Now, when I've got my legs straight up on that platform and I've got 200 kilos on the leg press, okay, I could probably have my legs straight there for a considerable amount of time.
Sure.
And I can withstand that 200 kilos. So that would be my strongest position in a leg press. However, as I start to bring that weight towards me, as I start to bend my knees and that weight comes before me, everything's getting weaker. So I'm weaker in that bottom position of the leg press. I then go to push it back up. So I'm pushing the load out of a weak position, and then I'm gradually getting stronger as I press that weight. So
Yeah.
the last third of that movement is probably going to be pretty easy for me.
Yeah.
However, if I strap a band around that, so if I put a band around the platform and it goes behind me or whatever, then what we've created is, as I start to push that weight, it's going to start pulling the band. So now we've got band tension, and it's going to start getting heavier as I go through that movement. So it's, as I'm pressing up, it's giving me more and more resistance. So I'm challenging that last one third of the rep.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so it sounds like there's a few things going on. One of which being the strength, or the strength profile of the muscle.
Yep.
The other one potentially the difference in joint angles that's being created during the movement. And so in this, are these two things that will exist in isolation, or it seems like they probably be directly related to each other? Like in this example of the lateral raise, obviously being able to produce the most force at the bottom, is that because of the reduced joint angle? And then obviously as we get to the top, we're creating this huge moment arm from the joint to the actual weight, and it's more difficult? Or are they things that coexist but just are related, if you like?
Sorry, my dog's getting mental.
That's all right. Having a great time.
So just to clarify, so the strength profiles and resistance profiles, do they always go together?
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to get at?
I think so. Yeah.
You always want to be able to match them together, so that the resistance profile of the movement that you're performing always matches the strength profile of the movement you're performing.
Yep.
In an ideal world, because that's what's going to train the muscle through its full range. However, there are certain exercises out there where they're never going to match.
Okay.
It just doesn't. It's incredibly difficult unless you have a machine that does it for you.
Have you got an example of one of those?
Pulling movements.
Right.
Okay. Most, if not all, free weight pulling movements that I can think of, they don't match.
Sure. Like a bent over row, if you like.
Yeah, exactly. And anything pulling, they just don't match unless you have a machine that can create it for you. It's incredibly hard. So when you do those sorts of exercises, you've just got to be aware of, you may want to superset certain exercises together, or drop set exercises together. So if we take the example of a bent over row, I'm always going to be weaker when that bar gets to my chest.
Sure.
But that's where I'm going to be weaker there, but weight's going to probably be at its heaviest.
Yeah.
Whereas when I've got it down here, there's no resistance at all there. So what I might do is I may take my bent over row and I might take it to failure. So I'm always going to fail in that shorter position first before I fail in the longer position. So what I might do is I might load up that bent over row and I might challenge myself in that lengthened, stronger position first. And then I might drop set it and take a bunch of the weight off so that I can carry on and then perhaps overload that shorter position, that weaker position as well. Okay, and then I've trained it fully. But for the sake, and I mean, that's if we want to take things to, if you're an advanced trainer or a bodybuilder that's looking to kind of squeeze every 1% out of something.
Sure, yeah.
But for general population clients, like the guys that we train, it's not the end of the world if you can't always match them up. And in some cases, it's really not required. But it's always something to be aware of, perhaps when that client gets a little bit more advanced. So, I have clients in all the time where I might stick them on the leg press, but I won't always just go ahead and band it straight away because the profiles match up. It may be a case of you've never been on a leg press before, but I think it's going to be really good for you. Yeah. So let's just learn the skill of the leg press.
Yeah.
And let's learn how to execute the leg press. Let's learn how to cue the leg press. Let's learn how to activate the muscles that you need to use in the leg press. And then once you've got all the things dialed down and we've built up to, quite a decent weight for you, then, let's wrap a band around it. Let's make it more challenging. But if you're an advanced trainer or someone in the gym that really wants to up it, if you feel like you've plateaued or whatever in a certain lift, then there's a good time to start utilizing this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think that exercise that the example you gave initially of the lateral raise is one that I've kind of touched on with people in the gym, young guys coming in doing lateral raises, showed them a cable, a cable variation, kind of explain through that concept of just getting more juice out of the exercise, essentially. But then usually, again, with young guys, there's a lot of kind of ego flying around, testosterone, and usually there's that kind of like, well, it's working response. And in some ways you can't argue with that if it's working and someone's getting benefit out of it, whether there's a more effective exercise that they could be doing or variation they can be doing. It's kind of like, well, how much does it really matter? But I think you did a good job of answering that really, and looking at it could be a good progression on if someone's got every bit of juice out of a variation, is kind of using a more favorable profile in terms of progressing that exercise. I've seen people talking about the reduced kind of strain on the joints in terms of using a favorable profile, and I know that's something that I've thought about with clients in terms of banding exercises. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how certain exercises might put a lot of strain on our kind of joints, and if we can reduce that, probably going to be
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really important one, because if we go back to the start, when I spoke about ultimately we want our clients to be healthy, and we want them to be healthy long term, and we especially want their joints to be healthy long term. So all joints, everything, all exercises that we do will be affected by both internal and external forces acting upon joints, muscles, etc.
Can you give a couple of examples of what you mean by internal and external forces?
An internal force might be the way in which a muscle pulls on a bone.
Right. Okay.
Or it might be like how two bones rub together within a joint, or something like that. An external force would be something putting force upon us, like a barbell in your hands, pulling you down, gravity, friction, those sorts of things. If I push into a leg press, there's going to be a force coming back at me. That sort of stuff.
I see.
So there's all of these things to consider. All of those forces are going to have some kind of impact on a joint in some way. And the general rule of thumb is the more force going through a joint, the more that joint then has to tolerate. The more it has to deal with. So if we can find an exercise that's going to reduce the amount of force going through a joint, the less stress is going to be placed on that joint, the healthier that joint is going to be in the long run.
Okay.
So if we take our dumbbell lateral raise example, if I move this so you can see, if I take this tape measure, say that this tape measure weighs, I know people might not be able to see this, but I've got a tape measure in my hand, or a dumbbell. It weighs 5 kilos, and I lift it up in a dumbbell lateral raise. Let's say that 5 kilo dumbbell is X amount of distance from my shoulder, which is the joint that I'm using to lift that weight up with. It's X amount of distance from the shoulder to the where the dumbbell is. Now, if you're someone that's got super long arms like me, that's quite a fair distance. So you've got all this force that's all the way out there acting on this little vulnerable joint here. That joint's going to have a lot to deal with. If I can somehow reduce that, if I can somehow bring the weight closer to the joint when I perform that exercise, it's going to be a lot healthier on that joint. I've reduced the amount of force that's on the joint.
Okay.
And then once I figure that out, what I can then do is actually focus more on what I want to do to the muscle and stimulate the muscle. And that's when things become fun.
So really, we're trying to get that same level of tension going through the muscle. We're trying to look at a loading strategy that's going to create that same level of kind of intramuscular tension whilst being more favorable in terms of the joint angles, to look after the kind of integrity of the joint.
Yeah, precisely. We want because we're in the gym and we're training clients to train muscles. We're not there to bash and train the joints, unless it's a specific case. So I want to be able to put together an exercise that's going to reduce the amount of force that's going through a joint to keep it healthy and protect it, whilst at the same time placing as much tension on the intended muscle as possible to help grow it.
Sure, yeah.
Now, some exercises you might not be able to do it. Other exercises you can, and it's all about figuring out how do we do this stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think the easiest example is that lateral raise example, and I guess your option would be loading with the cable in a kind of horizontal cable direction to kind of load whilst deloading a little bit towards the end of the movement to take the pressure off the joint.
Yeah, definitely.
So in terms of, I was going to ask you something. I've seen people putting together kind of drop sets, if you like, where they're looking at actually almost the opposite of what we're saying, and they're looking at challenging the shortened ranges, if you like, with more loads. So a lateral raise, to use that example again, starting to use like accommodating resistance in a lateral raise. So using like a chain, for example, or a band. So actually when they get to the top of the movement, it's at its heaviest. And then they'll go on and add in other exercises where the profile is getting more favorable as they go down. Do you think there's any kind of benefit in terms of challenging in those kind of weaker ranges in terms of maybe strengthening them? Or do you think that the kind of the problem or the kind of pressure on the joint just isn't worth the investment?
I personally wouldn't look at an exercise that way. It's not going to be favorable on the joint for one, and it's also not training the muscle as efficiently as it could be trained, in my opinion. Because for a lot of times, if you were to overload, if someone's got chains attached to a dumbbell and they can get all the way up here, they're training that short position. Yeah, that's fine. But they're still not training in that lengthened position. So you'd be miles better off just creating an exercise that's going to challenge you in that lengthened position, slowly start to drop off so you can handle it in the mid position, and then slowly drop off again so that you're challenging it in the weaker short position.
Sure.
And a lot of times, as we go through a movement, if it's getting heavier in the shorter position, it's going to fatigue quickly. And then as you go throughout the rep, you're going to end up in a position where you're not getting as much range of motion as what you could before. So then you stop training the muscle fully. And is that a huge deal for a lot of people? Possibly not.
Yeah.
You always have to go back, okay, well, why do I care? But for those that are really looking to eke out that that extra 1%, then yeah, it does become important.
Mm.
And especially, especially if, say, you're doing, let's just say you're doing a leg extension, and that leg extension machine has been designed where it gets heavier. It gets heavier at the top and it's lighter at the bottom. So in a leg extension, we're always weaker when we come up to the top, and we'll be stronger down in the bottom. So you may pick a weight where you can go all the way from the bottom to the top. And as soon as that top portion then starts to get fatigued and starts to reach failure, you could carry on going. You could just keep going and do kind of partial reps until that lengthened position is then fully fatigued. But then you've ended up doing loads and loads of reps. Sure. Then you've gone through, fucking 20, 30 reps. And, or it might take you 5 or 6 sets to reach that position. Whereas if we can find an exercise that's going to challenge it through its full range within 2 sets of 8 to 10 reps, then I'm going to go for that, because it means it's less time. I can put more effort into it. I know I'm training it fully, and then I can move on.
And would you look at adapting a machine? I mean, they do have the kind of leg extensions where you can, like you say, change the resistance profile during different points of the machine. But I guess most people training at commercial gyms and even, fairly nice gyms don't have access to those kind of machines. Would you be able to construct a more favorable resistance profile for the machine with bands or other bits of kit?
Yeah, sometimes I would. I mean, if there's a machine that does it all for you, then perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the machines aren't built. A lot of the machines, they're not built that way. They're built quite poorly. If it's quick and easy to set up, let's take a banded leg press, for example. Takes 10 seconds to set that up. Yeah, I'll throw that on there. If it's an exercise where it's going to take me ages to set it up, I don't want to really waste that client's time.
Yeah, sure.
And then you can just use manual assistance. I mean, that's what I'm there for. So if we take the leg extension, for example, if the machine's built poorly and it's getting heavier towards the top, what I might do is I might put a weight that's heavy enough where that client can get it to about 2/3, and then I might just give them a spot.
Okay, sure.
I'll just use manual assistance, and I'll take a little bit of the weight, and I'll help them get all the way up till they're at their kind of max knee extension, and then I'll let go and I'll let it drop off. And you can just alter things that way as well, and that that's what we're here for. And same example for something. Let's just take like a bench press, for example. A bench press, you'll be stronger in the top position, so you unrack the bar, you've got your arms locked out super straight, shoulders back. That's your strongest position. And then as you start to bring that bar down towards your chest, you're going to get a lot weaker. So what I might do in that instance is, you've got 2 options. You can either load the weight up quite heavy, and you can just manually take a little bit of the load off as they get towards the bottom. And then as they start to press up, you can start to take your hands away, so they're then handling that heavier weight. Or you can pick a weight that is favorable for the weaker position.
Sure.
And then as they start to push up on that bar, you then just give them a little bit of give back.
Okay.
You push down. Okay. You start to push down on the bar as they push up. So you're adding a bit of extra resistance to the exercise there. So you don't always have to come up with fancy contraptions, and it looks really cool on Instagram and stuff. But in terms of saving a client's time, I'll use me. That's what we're that's what we're there for. And like I said before, in some cases you might have clients come in where you just don't bother with any of that stuff. But I feel like it's always good to have it in your head just in case you need to use it. Especially if you've got clients with injuries as well, is a big one. Or if you're doing an exercise with a client and they start to say, oh, this doesn't quite feel right, or something's starting to hurt there. You can then might be able to analyze it a little bit and say, oh, that's happening because of this, or your knees are hurting because we've got this much weight on, you're a lot weaker in that position. So if I can alter that to make it more favorable to you, then that might solve that pain that you're feeling. So it's good to have it in your head for when you need it, but it's not something where you constantly have to be changing things to make them perfect.
Yeah. So you might not, I suppose there might be a small amount of consideration initially when it comes to exercise selection, but it wouldn't be something where you'd be trying to craft the perfect exercise for every exercise in someone's program.
No, definitely not. I mean, like I said before, you know, if I have a client that comes in and I have a look at some stuff and I think, cool, I think let's try the leg press. I feel like that would work quite well for you. I'd probably just start off and have the leg press as is. Because again, we want to learn the skill. We want to teach them to be able to get that mind muscle connection. We want to be able to cue them properly, make sure they're executing everything properly. And once they've got all of those things sorted, or they've built up to such an incredible weight where you think, actually, how do we now make this even more challenging? I know, let's add a band to it. Now let's see how that feels.
Yeah.
And then you might go into it. And like I said, clients with injuries. And I've got a client who has, you know, he's had grotty knees for years. He's got half a cartilage in one of his knees.
Right. Okay.
Moves quite well, moves really well. But we know that there's a problem with the joint there. So we want to look after that joint as best we can. So if he's doing an exercise like a leg press, I'm going to want to make sure that as he gets into that weaker position and that knee gets vulnerable, that the weight's getting offloaded. So for him, I'm picking a weight that he can tolerate in his weakest position.
Yeah.
To make sure that when he's in that weak position, he's safe. And then as he pushes up, he has the bands to make it heavier, where he starts to get a little bit stronger.
Okay, brilliant. So I guess it's getting away from that, you know, the value of how much weight is on the bar, and saying we need to construct a kind of resistance profile that's going to train the muscle to get the result we want. The number isn't really important, and the progression, I guess there still is progression in terms of the number that's going to, you know, the weight on the bar, or maybe how much, you know, band tension you're using, things like that. But ultimately, it's finding the right number to get that, you know, the correct, you know, training effect without compromising joint integrity.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I say this to clients all the time, because you always get those clients that come in the gym that just want, they just see numbers and they just want to get big numbers and lift heavy and, you know, feel good, masculine, you know, all this kind of stuff. And some, you know, a lot of the times they get carried away. But what I might do is, and I've got clients that are like this all the time. They might say, oh, I want to go up, let's take a dumbbell press, for example. They might say, cool, I want to go up to the 35s today. And you say, okay, cool. Do you think you're ready for the 35s? Yeah, I'm ready for the 35s. Okay, fine, cool. Let's have a go at it. They might do a set of 8, good form, or whatever. They put the weight down. I might say, cool, I'm going to now drop us down to the 25s. Okay, but I want you to execute it like this. And this is what I want you to be thinking about when you perform that exercise. So when they pick up the 35s, they're thinking, I want to move this weight from A to B.
Yeah.
They're thinking external. They're thinking, I want to move the 35s from A to B for 8 reps with good form. And I might say, okay, cool, I want you to move the 25s, but whilst you're moving the 25s, I want you to contract and tense your chest for 4 seconds on the way up and on the way down for 10 reps. And then once we've done those 2 sets, I want you to tell me which set you felt the most in your chest, which felt better.
Yeah, sure.
And 9 times out of 10, they'll say the latter, because they're getting this unbelievable burning sensation in their chest. You know, they're getting a good pump on. It feels great.
Yeah.
And all this kind of stuff. So what I might say is, okay, cool. If you didn't know them, if I had taken those 25s but told you they were 35s, how would you feel? Feel like, yeah, I'd feel great. So then it becomes one of those kind of little debates with them where you say you're getting more out of the 25s than you are the 35s. And again, that all comes down to the goal, what their goal is. If it's a power lifter or a strong man or someone like that, all they care about is moving the weight from A to B, because that's the goal. So as long as they can perform that safely, fine, cool, let's go ahead, let's start loading it up. Let's move that weight from A to B. If it's a general population client, weight loss, muscle building, etc., I'm going to want to pick a load where everything can be executed properly and everything's firing, everything's feeling good. And again, we're looking after joints, because a 25 kilo dumbbell is going to put less stress on the joint than a 35 kilo dumbbell.
Sure, yeah.
And if we can get them to a place where actually the chest is on fire using the 25s as opposed to 35s, I'm going to stick with the 25s, and then we'll build up. And I say to clients all the time, if they get a little bit angry, saying, "Oh, I haven't increased my bench press for 4 weeks," you know, I'm like, cool, okay, maybe you've hit a little bit of a plateau. So if we can't progress in weight, can we progress in reps, or can we progress in sets?
Yeah.
If we can't progress in reps or sets, then okay, cool. Can we progress in execution?
Yeah, form and tempo and things.
Yeah, can you do? You know, we've been doing a 3 second down, 3 second up tempo previously, but can you match the same sets and reps with the same weight for a 4 second down, 4 second up tempo? Can we progress that way? Can we progress in your mind muscle connection? Are you able to contract your muscle throughout the entire range as opposed to maybe just the end range or the start of the range?
So this is interesting. You're kind of flipping the normal goal of progression. You're kind of taking progressive overload and actually almost applying like an inverse logic to it and saying, can we get the same goal of progressive overload in terms of increasing weight? Can we get the same effectiveness out of an exercise with a much lighter weight, or can we keep that progress going whilst keeping the weight as light as possible to make progress? And when we think about the exercise design, the way we're loading it, the execution, we're almost trying to keep the weight as low as possible whilst getting the same or the most benefit out of the exercise whilst keeping the weight as low as possible.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite to probably what most people try and do when they go in the gym, which would be, we need to get the weight as high as possible, you know, because that's going to yield the most results. But
yeah, and it is still progressive overload, because you're adding a new stimulus to that muscle. You are progressing in areas, and it's obviously you do want, you know, increasing load is a part of it. It does play a part of it, because otherwise we'd all be using 5 kilo dumbbells with a 20 second eccentric and a 20-second concentric for a chest press. You know, there's definitely a balance there. But I feel like if you've got a client or if you're training yourself and you're at a stage where, if bumping up, say if I'm stuck on 30 kilo dumbbells for a chest press and the next level up is the 35s, if the jump from 30 to 35 is too much for my joints to handle, if my form starts to break down, if something's not right, is it worth it for the sake of, I've gone from the 30s to 35s?
Sure, yeah.
In my opinion, probably not. So, like I said before, if the jump from 30 to 35 is too much right now, where I want to keep all the other factors in place, then I need to carry on progressing the 30s in some other way to continue to create that stimulus that I'm after, to keep that muscle growing.
So if someone could take that jump up to the 35 and say get a pretty good set, for 8, for example, with fairly good form, but would you then still favor using the 30s and just using other kind of methods to intensify that exercise, like slower tempos, more kind of intramuscular focus and the such? Would you rather keep them at that slightly lower weight for a slightly longer period of time with those focuses rather than take them up?
For some clients, yeah. Other clients, no. Again, it completely depends on who you have in front of you. If if I've got a client where, and again, you don't want to waste a lot of their time. If I'm performing sets of 12 to 15 with a client for 3 sets, maybe, I don't want to get to a point where they're doing 12 reps with a 5 down, 5 up tempo, because that set's going to be so long.
Yeah.
If I can increase the weight there, and I know that the joint can tolerate it, I know that they can execute it with a decent tempo, good form, and I know that they've got that internal focus of the chest contracting throughout the entire range, then yeah, I'll just bump them up.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, as long as I feel happy that client is going to be safe with that heavier weight, then yeah, we'll bump them up to it because it's going to make them feel good.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that's okay. That's really interesting, and certainly, this kind of idea about, or this different kind of approach, if you like, in terms of looking at the other aspects in terms of the strength profiles, resistance profiles of exercises. That kind of intramuscular like focus, and looking at some of the other things other than weight is certainly, you can see how that's going to benefit people looking to build muscle, and bodybuilders, physique, people who are focused with physique, and certainly we can see where that's going to benefit people with kind of injuries and chronic pain or problems around the joints. Would you say that these things are still going to be helping athletic populations, people looking for performance and trying to increase that kind of that tissue tolerance to force within their sport?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. When it comes to something like sports performance, if we look at contact sports, for instance, when they're in that environment playing their sport, they're going to get themselves in situations where joints are going to get challenged in all kinds of weird places, weird angles, etc.
Certainly, yeah.
So it's important that you kind of prep joints for what's to come in a safe environment. So in a sports performance perspective, there are instances where you might want to place the joint in what we might call a more vulnerable position, but safely.
Yeah.
So if we take my sport, for instance, in rugby, it's always going to happen in rugby where you might have your arm out here and someone's going to pull on it, or something's going to happen, and that joint's going to be placed under a lot of stress. So I want to make sure that I'm ready for that. So I might, and I mean, I do it as well, specifically do some end range work. So strengthen the joint at its full end range and get it strong in that fully that full end range, so that if something were to happen in that contact sport environment, it can tolerate it.
I see. Yeah.
But
yeah.
in the context of training Gen Pop clients or bodybuilding, things like that, unless they're being really stupid in the gym, I'm quite confident that you don't need to do that. You're better off figuring things out and working out how can we reduce joint forces in this exercise to make things safe, that they can build as much muscle as possible without having to have all of these little aches and pains.
So that's a good takeaway, really, isn't it? Just for the general population, for people looking to go into the gym to get a bit bigger and kind of improve their physique, is trying to think about how can we train the muscle and how can we kind of reduce forces on the joints that kind of govern the joint actions and the joints that are kind of, being governed by those muscles.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where it's in simple terms, it's a no-brainer, really. When if you completely take out, this exercise, dumbbell lat raises get you big shoulders type thing, bench press gets you big chest. If you stop looking at things that way and you start looking at things in a sense of, cool, how can I make this muscle bigger without ruining this joint? What can I use to take this muscle from its lengthened position to its shortened position, with a weight that's going to contract it fully without killing the joint? And then you figure that out. It's kind of like if we take a dumbbell lat raise again for an example, it's always going to put a tremendous amount of joint force through the shoulder there. But someone might say, oh yeah, but I've built up to this weight and it looks really cool when I can throw up the 20s. Okay, well that would kind of be like me saying, okay, well let's take this £1 million house. I'm building it on super strong foundations because I know that's what works. You're building it on bamboo because you learned somewhere that building a bamboo foundation is cheaper and it's what people in other countries do, so you should do it.
Yeah, sure.
Type scenario.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see that. Yeah, it's flipping on its head, isn't it? And it's trying to train a bit smarter, really. Yeah.
It's training smart for the sake of keeping healthy.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that. And I think, are there places that people can go to kind of read more about this subject or kind of learn more about YouTube channels, things like this?
Yeah, so there's definitely sources out there. So for people that are interested in learning it, I would recommend there's a couple of books that I would recommend. The first book is Joint Structure and Function. I've actually got it down here because I'm reading it, which is this one. Oh,
brilliant. Nice. I'll have to write that one down.
Joint structure and function. That's a really good book for just teaching you this stuff about the effects that forces have on joints and keeping them healthy.
Okay.
I'd also just advise that people just learn more about anatomy.
Yeah.
So just knowing what's happening to a muscle when we perform this movement, getting a bit more of an inside view. And I remember when I first started coaching and people, and I was seeing these people and they were saying, you should really learn your anatomy. I was thinking, well, why the fuck do I need to know about anatomy? My clients don't give a shit about anatomy.
Yeah.
All my clients want to do is come to the gym, get boosted, and go. Well, they don't give a shit. So I'm not going to waste my time learning all of this fluff. But then you get to a point where you think, actually, the client doesn't need to know that I know this stuff, but I need to know this stuff that I can do this with them. And Michael Goulden, who teaches RTS in the UK, hit one of his phrases that I love is think science, speak client.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. So if a client says, I want to build a bigger chest, I'm thinking in my head, cool. You know, let's have a look at how your rib cage is built. You have a big rib cage or a small rib cage. What angle do your pecs pull in? Are they coming in flat or are they coming in up? All of this kind of stuff. And then I might look at that and go, cool, I'm going to do this exercise and let's see how that works. And they'll do that exercise. And they're like, oh, bloody hell, I've never felt, and my chest burn like that before. Maybe I've been doing it all wrong. And the only reason I've been able to get them to that point is because I know this stuff. I've learned a little bit about anatomy. I've learned a little bit about how joints work, etc. And now I've created a safe exercise for that client. It's getting them closer toward that goal. But I don't need to explain any of that stuff to them. They really don't care.
No, they're just having a good workout and getting a good kind of pump or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I would definitely suggest people, touch up on their anatomy, and that doesn't mean that you need to learn it to to such an in-depth point that you could perform like a biopsy on somebody and know absolutely everything. Just a decent amount of knowledge of, okay, this muscle, it attaches somewhere around here and it attaches somewhere up there and it pulls kind of it this way. And fine, that's you don't need to know all the ins and outs unless you're a bit of a nerd and you get a boner over that kind of stuff and you want to. And then a few courses as well. There's a company called the Muscle Mentors.
Oh yeah.
They've got an education portal now where they teach all of this stuff. The guys that run that company, Callum, Luke, Ryan, James and Alex, they've spent years learning these principles through resistance training specialists to a point where they're now able to teach it back to people.
Yeah, they're excellent.
Yeah, they run an education portal online that you pay for monthly. They've got all this stuff there. So if you're more of a visual learner, you can go learn that stuff there. There's also, and then there's Integra Education, where they run by Michael Gordon in London, and he teaches this stuff as part of his courses. So he's currently the only guy in the UK that can officially teach the RTS principles that Tom Purvis created. He's the only kind of person certified to coach it, as it were, in the UK. So you can go on his courses and do those. For me personally, as a learner, practical stuff I always learn the best. I like to I can learn stuff from books and stuff, but I like to go to courses, be face to face with people, get down into the nitty gritty and kind of see things with my own eyes. So I definitely would recommend the courses. And Muscle Mentors, they do practical courses as well, if people want to go on those. And I know Michael is slowly building up an online thing, but
maybe slightly more rapidly at the moment.
Yeah, probably. He's a really busy man. But there's courses to go on as well.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot more information on it now than when I first started learning it. Sure. I think you just kind of got to know where to look.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one to read around, but like you say, some of those sources, I'm sure, have got loads of content that they're putting up.
They're great. So I'd recommend those books. There's a website, if you want to learn anatomy, there's a website called KenHub. KenHub, yeah. And that's like an interactive learning thing where all the muscles, bones, etc. They're all it's all kind of animated, as it were. It's all graphics, and you can watch like a video. You might take it's all broken down. So you might take, let's say, the shoulder, for example. They might have like a 20-minute long video talking to you about all the bones associated with the shoulder, all the muscles associated with it, all the nerves that are associated with it, where all the muscles originate and insert.
Sure.
What all the functions of them are, etc. And you can watch through that video, and then they provide you with quizzes, so you can just do multiple choice quizzes.
Oh, brilliant!
And you can quiz yourself, and you can learn this stuff through quizzing yourself, and you can retake those as many times as you like.
Really good. Yeah, that's really good.
And I use that quite a lot, because there's some, and they go from complete beginner to complete advanced. So they might start off with a multiple choice question where they'll have a picture of a muscle, and they might have 4 different answers, and you just got to pick which one you think it is, and it'll tell you if you're right or wrong. And then once you've then once you've nailed that, you can go on to more advanced ones where they'll show you a muscle or a bone, and the question might be, what is this? And you have to physically type in what it is.
Okay, so you're not getting the answer somewhere.
Yeah, and they'll hammer you on the spelling as well. Or
right.
So you get like you might get an E and an I the wrong way round, and it's wrong.
Yeah.
And you can really test yourself that way. And they're the really annoying ones.
Okay.
I'll do like 10 of those before I actually get it right. And it's a good way to, and then it's in your head.
Yeah, you'll know it after that, won't you? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's a really good resource as well. And I think that one is like 99 quid for a lifetime subscription.
Well, definitely worth it for someone who's, really keen on and interested in health and fitness, or PTs, or, just enthusiastic, clients.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, definitely
100%.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll put some links to those recommendations in the text below the video, because there are definitely a lot of those things I'll be going and looking at myself. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us, Ben. People know kind of where they can get in contact with you, or where they can kind of consume your content and things like that?
So Instagram is where everything goes on. It's just Ben_performance. Or if people are local to Haywards Heath, West Sussex area, the Performance Project is where I work. If people want to book in and come have a chat and learn stuff, I'm happy to sit down with people.
Great stuff. Cool. All right. Well, look, thanks for coming to speak to us, Ben, and we'd love to have you back at some point to kind of talk through some of this stuff in a bit more detail another time.
Perfect. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, guys. So thanks for listening. That was a great show, and Ben's shared some really interesting insights into the sort of things that we as PTs and coaches kind of think about when we're putting together your programs, and when we're selecting specific exercises and equipment for you guys to use. Some quite in-depth stuff there, and maybe some new concepts that you might not have come across before. So he's given you some great links and some great kind of further reading around that. So I've included the links to those things at the bottom. So certainly follow up on those. We're going to have content surrounding a lot of the things that we've spoken to today on our Performance Hub online members site. So again, go and check that out, and you get that free first month if you haven't done that already, using the link below. Go and like and follow Ben on his socials, and again, go and do the same. And if you can, go and share, comment and like on this podcast, because it really helps us to produce more great content like this, and get in contact with great trainers and people in the world of health and fitness like Ben, and to bring them in front of you to talk about the things that they know about best. Okay guys, so like I said, go and hit us up on those socials, and we'll see you guys next time.